The first time my wife, Sarah, called him her work husband, I actually laughed. It was a cold Tuesday evening. We were on the sofa, scrolling through a streaming service, the kind of mundane, comfortable silence that defines a good, long marriage. She was half listening to me complain about my spreadsheet overload at the audit firm, the same one she worked at, just on a different floor, when her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down, smiled, and quickly typed a reply. "Oh, that's just Mark. My office husband is panicking about the quarterly review deck. Gotta go save the day." I chuckled, nudging her playfully with my elbow. "Office husband, huh? Better be careful, Peterson. You're treading on thin ice with a real husband." She rolled her eyes in that cute, exasperated way she did. "Oh, please, Johnny. Don't be ridiculous. It's Mark Peterson. He's just my work buddy. We're in the trenches together. That's all. We all joke like that. It's just corporate gallows humor. I bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Why wouldn't I?" Sarah and I, Johnny Smith and Sarah Smith, we were solid. 10 years of marriage, a mortgage on a cute little ranch house, 2 annoyingly fluffy cats, and a shared career path in the soul-numbing world of corporate auditing. We were a team. Mark, this office husband, was just part of the scenery. He was the guy who ran to the coffee machine with her, the one who shared her cynicism about upper management, the one who apparently needed saving from quarterly review decks. It was innocent. It had to be. But that initial laugh, that easy, comfortable chuckle, it started to sour in my stomach almost immediately after. It wasn't the label that bothered me. I knew she wasn't literally planning a second wedding with a coworker. It was the way she rushed to his aid. It was the little things that followed. The late-night texts that weren't about actual emergencies, but about him complaining that his real wife, a woman named Jennifer, was making him eat kale again. The way Sarah would light up when she talked about a small victory at work. But the story always revolved around Mark's reaction. My own office was on the 12th floor. Sarah and Mark were on the 15th. We rarely crossed paths during the day, which ironically meant I wasn't there to witness the slow, subtle erosion of a boundary. I was blind, trusting, and busy drowning in my own stack of compliance documents. But when we get home, I'd see the residue. I'd catch her staring off into space with a little private smile. She'd say, "Mark did the funniest thing today," and launch into a story that was just a little too detailed, a little too intimate for a professional relationship. One evening, about a month after the office husband joke, we were at a terrible Italian restaurant trying to celebrate my birthday. The pasta was bland, the wine was corked, and the atmosphere was strained. Sarah was on her phone, again, not scrolling social media, but texting. Her thumbs were flying. I asked her who it was. She flinched, almost physically, and shoved the phone face down. "Oh, just Mark. He's asking about that complex depreciation schedule. Work stuff, you know." I nodded, but the lie felt heavy in the air between us. Work stuff? At 8:30 p.m. on a Saturday. Talking about depreciation schedules? Maybe. But the flash of panic in her eyes told a different story. The sudden defensive posture. It was the first crack in the foundation, and the cold draft that rushed in was pure, raw suspicion. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being the stereotypical, paranoid husband. They were just close friends. They were both auditors. They spoke the same weird corporate language. It made sense they bonded. I didn't believe it. I couldn't. The jokes started to feel like insults. Every time she mentioned him, every time a text pinged after 9 p.m., it felt like a deliberate, tiny pinprick designed to test my boundaries. He needs help with a client presentation. He's stressed about Jennifer's new diet. He forgot his lunch. Mark. It was an echo in my house, a permanent third party in our marriage. It escalated one night when I caught her doing something odd. She was sitting in the dark kitchen, hunched over her phone, her back to me. I walked in, flipped on the light, and she jumped a foot in the air, scrambling to hide the screen. "Johnny, you scared me," she whispered, her voice tight. "Sorry, couldn't sleep. What are you doing in the dark?" She forced a laugh. "Nothing, just catching up on some emails. Long day." But the light of the phone screen had illuminated her face for a split second, and I saw a look of guilt, of being caught, that was impossible to misinterpret. She wasn't reading an email. She was engaged in a deep, private conversation she didn't want me to see. It was in that moment, in the dark kitchen, that the initial easygoing laugh died in absolute death. The joke was over. The suspicion was now a certainty, a cold knot tightening in my chest. I knew, with a horrible, sinking certainty, that her work husband was far more than just a colleague who needed saving from a quarterly review deck. He was a threat, a secret, and he was about to blow our entire lives up. My only remaining question was, how deep did the deception go? And what was I going to do when I found out? Now, before I get into the really messy stuff, I need to know something. If you've ever had a relationship get totally blindsided by an outside force, whether it's a coworker, a friend, or a massive, life-changing secret, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching this video and what time it is. I want to see how many of us have been there, staring at a wall of betrayal, wondering what to do next. My name is Johnny Smith. Last name is Smith, easy enough, right? We're an easy enough couple, or at least we were, before Mark Peterson started injecting himself like a corporate parasite. Our setting is the kind of place that specializes in making things look perfectly organized on the outside while being a complete emotional mess on the inside. A high-rise audit office in a major metropolitan area. Think glass walls, polished concrete, and a perpetual, low-humming anxiety. We're both senior auditors. It's a career path that sounds boring, but it's lucrative, which is why Sarah and I were together in the first place. A shared ambition for stability and a slightly uncomfortable ergonomic chair. Sarah, let's call her Sarah Smith too, for simplicity's sake, is brilliant. Seriously, she can spot a fraudulent transaction in a stack of 10K filings faster than anyone I know. She has this quick, sharp wit that first drew me in, and a laugh that can cut through the noise of a busy trading floor. We met during an exhausting company retreat where we both realized we were the only two people who weren't pretending to enjoy the trust falls. That shared, quiet cynicism was our first spark. For 10 years, our life was built on that shared foundation. Hard work, shared goals, and a mutual understanding of the absurdities of corporate life. We were a classic audit couple. We'd come home, complain about our respective clients. Hers was usually a big, sloppy tech firm. Mine was a stuffy manufacturing giant, and then crack open a bottle of cheap Pinot Grigio to celebrate surviving another day. It was our routine, and I loved it. It was boring, but it was ours. But then came the rise of the office husband. The office is huge, a fortress of spreadsheets and confidentiality agreements. My team is on the 12th floor, focused on manufacturing compliance. Sarah's team, the fast-paced, high-stress tech audit division, is on the 15th. Mark Peterson was one of her lead colleagues. I'd seen him in the cafeteria a few times. He was the quintessential corporate golden boy. Perfectly coiffed hair, a smile that looked expensive, and the kind of casual confidence that only comes from knowing you're well-liked and probably overpaid. He was handsome, I'll give him that, in that clean-cut, non-threatening, slightly dull way that HR departments love. Their connection, as Sarah initially explained it, was pure trauma bonding. They were running the most difficult audits together, pulling all-nighters, and living on coffee and stale bagels. She'd say things like, "Mark and I are practically married. We spend more time together than we do with our actual spouses." And I'd just shrug it off. It's what people say. It's just shorthand for shared corporate misery. The shift, when I look back, was incremental but undeniable. It started with the small, relatable moments she stopped sharing with me and started sharing with him. Instead of complaining to me about her ridiculously demanding project manager, she'd vent to Mark via text, only telling me the watered-down version later. The little quirks I used to find endearing, her habit of stress-eating only the red Skittles, her detailed, often hilarious impersonations of the CEO, those became inside jokes with Mark. I remember one specific Sunday afternoon. We were cleaning the garage, a chore we both hated. I was trying to make a joke about how we were basically living out a bad sitcom episode when I heard her phone buzz. She picked it up, read the text, and genuinely laughed, a full, delighted burst that I hadn't heard directed at me in weeks. "What's so funny?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. She looked up, still smiling, but the smile faded when she saw my face. "Oh, just Mark. He sent me a meme about how our clients' financial statements looked like a toddler drew them. So true, though. It was the way she reacted to him. That unburdened, pure joy. It was the emotional intimacy I was starting to feel starved of. It was the feeling that my wife had found a new primary audience for her best material. And that audience was Mark Peterson. The worst part wasn't even the potential physical affair, though there was a terrifying phantom in the back of my mind. The worst part was the emotional connection they clearly shared. They spoke the same language, shared the same daily battlefield, and now they shared a secret that was slowly pushing me out of the picture. She was my wife, my partner, but every day she was bringing home less of herself and leaving more of her best self. Her energy, her humor, her vulnerability at the office with him. He wasn't just a coworker. He was a replacement spouse for the soul-crushing part of her life. He was there for the good and bad moments of her day, providing comfort and connection that I was too busy or too far removed to give, stuck down on the 12th floor. And the deeper their bond became, the colder our house felt. The more they joked and commiserated, the less she needed to confide in me. That's the setup. Two people, Sarah and I, whose life was defined by the security of their jobs, suddenly having that security threatened by a third person, Mark, who was supposed to be nothing more than a shared burden of corporate stress. But he was far more than that. He was the crack in our foundation, the quiet, handsome, perfectly coiffed harbinger of total domestic destruction. And the simple fact that I worked in the same building, under the same corporate umbrella, meant that whatever happened next, there was no escaping the fallout. The stage was set for a truly spectacular corporate and marital explosion. Mark Peterson, the architect of this slow-motion domestic disaster, wasn't just Sarah's office husband. He was her partner in crime on the 15th floor. I need you to understand his vibe. He wasn't some brooding, mysterious bad boy. He was calculatedly non-threatening, the kind of guy who drove a sensible SUV and always brought organic fruit to potlucks. He was the safe choice for an emotional affair because he blended in. He was married, had 2 kids, and his biggest personality flaw, according to Sarah, was his inability to load a dishwasher correctly, which his wife Jennifer apparently complained about constantly. My issue with Mark wasn't just his existence. It was the boundary-pushing office closeness that defined their dynamic. It was an intimacy that was disguised as collaboration. Their desks were side by side in the open-plan bullpen. They ate lunch together every single day in the small, rarely used conference room, ostensibly to talk strategy, but really to vent about their lives. I tried to be reasonable. Truly, I did. I asked Sarah about it directly one evening while we were making dinner. "Hey, honey," I started, carefully chopping an onion. "I know you and Mark are close, but sometimes it feels like you guys share a little too much. Does that ever feel a little weird?" Sarah stopped stirring the sauce and put the spoon down with a clatter. Her immediate reaction was sharp, defensive. "Weird? What's weird, Johnny? We're friends. We work 20 feet away from each other for 12 hours a day. We talk about stuff. We lean on each other. You think I should just sit there silently and be miserable?" "No, of course not." I rushed to reassure her, holding on my hands, knife in one, onion in the other. "It's just the office husband thing, and the late-night texts, and the fact that everything is always about him." She crossed her arms. "It's a joke, Johnny. Get over it. It's what people say. I have to work with him. I have to trust him. It's a toxic work environment, and we're all we have up there. If you're so worried, why don't you come up to the 15th floor and audit our workflow?" The suggestion was ridiculous, and she knew it. My team had strict security clearance related to our clients. I couldn't just wander up and loiter. Her defensiveness, though, was the real punch to the gut. It wasn't the calm, rational explanation I needed. It was an angry deflection designed to make me feel guilty for even asking. It was classic gaslighting disguised as corporate defense. From that night on, the dynamic in our house shifted from subtle awkwardness to overt tension. Every time her phone buzzed, I felt a physical spike of adrenaline. Every time she went quiet, I wondered what she was thinking about and who. I remember one night she was sick, truly miserable with a fever, and she was texting Mark from the couch. She wasn't texting her mother or her best friend or even me, her actual husband, who was making her soup and running to the pharmacy. She was texting him. "What are you telling him?" I asked, holding a thermometer. "He's worried about the presentation tomorrow. I'm just telling him the key points." "He needs my notes," she said, her voice raspy. "You're telling a grown man who you call your office husband the key points of a presentation while you have a 102-degree fever? Are you too codependent, or is he actually incapable of reading your notes?" That's when she exploded. "You are being completely suffocating, Johnny. You're jealous of my friendships. You're trying to police my professional life. I work with Mark. I don't sleep with him. Can you just stop?" She was screaming now, tears welling in her eyes, not from the fever, but from the confrontation. And in that moment, seeing her so distressed, I backed down. I apologized. I told myself I was the problem. I was the jealous one, the paranoid one, the one who couldn't handle his brilliant wife having a brilliant, close, male friend at work. I felt small, defeated, and deeply ashamed of my suspicious nature. But as I walked back to the kitchen, the words she used kept echoing in my head. "I work with Mark. I don't sleep with him." Why the immediate jump to the physical? I hadn't even mentioned sex. I had been talking about emotional intimacy, about professional boundaries. Her quick, angry denial felt less like the protest of an innocent person and more like the overcompensation of someone desperately trying to cover up the main secret while deflecting attention to a secondary one. The combination of the continuous low-level deceit, the extreme defensiveness, and the blatant prioritization of her work husband over her actual husband led to a crushing realization. I was not being paranoid. I was being ignored. The reality was that my wife's joke had stopped being a joke a long time ago. It had become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and now I had to find a definitive proof that would either free me from my anxiety or confirm my greatest fear. The passive-aggressive warfare was over. It was time for a full-scale information audit. The cold, hard certainty hit me a few nights later, and it didn't come with dramatic music or a slow-motion revelation. It came from a moment of pure, dumb luck and an unlocked phone. Sarah had been pulling late nights all week, ostensibly working on a major audit presentation. She finally collapsed in a bed around 11:30 p.m., dead tired. I was sitting up, scrolling through the news, when I heard her phone buzz across the room on her nightstand. A quick, staccato series of 3 pings. I ignored it. For a few minutes, I fought the urge. I told myself to be a man, to trust my wife, to respect her privacy. But then I remembered the tight look of panic in the dark kitchen, the defensive screams, the constant presence of Mark's name in our home. I was suffocating under the weight of my suspicion, and I knew, deep down, that the only way out was through. I had to know the truth, even if the truth destroyed me. I slid out of bed, heart hammering against my ribs, convinced she would wake up. The phone screen was already dark, but I knew her passcode. It was our old anniversary date. I typed it in, and the screen flashed to life. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone on the thick carpet. The first thing I saw was a series of notifications, and one name dominated the screen: Mark Peterson. I went straight to the messaging app. I didn't bother with texts. I went for the secure, end-to-end encrypted app they use for their daily chatter. The chat log was open to their most recent conversation. It was a digital trail of breadcrumbs that led directly to the worst kind of betrayal. The messages weren't about depreciation schedules or client presentations. They were late-night confessions, inside jokes that had nothing to do with work, and a level of deep, agonizing emotional devastation that made my eyes burn. I scrolled up, my stomach clenching with every line. It started innocuously enough weeks ago. Mark complaining about his wife, Jennifer, and Sarah offering gentle, supportive advice. "I just don't think she understands me, yes. You're the only one who gets it." Sarah's reply: "I know, Em. I wish I could fix it all for you. You deserve better." Sweet, right? Supportive. But then it became flirty. "You make this go-doffel job bearable. I wish I could trade my desk chair for the couch next to you right now." Then the language changed. It became possessive, almost aggressive in its intimacy. They were sharing details of our respective marriages, the boring parts, the fights, the lack of intimacy. They were creating a shared narrative where they were the tragic, misunderstood heroes trapped by their dull, unfeeling spouses, me and Jennifer. And then I found it. The messages that confirmed the physical aspect of the affair. It wasn't explicit, but it was damn close. Mark, 10:47 p.m. last Friday. I can still smell your perfume on my collar. That quick 5 minutes in the server room was the most alive I've felt all year. Sarah, 10:50 p.m. last Friday. Don't be crazy. We can't do that again, Em. But I miss the thrill. I miss you. Mark, 10:52 p.m. last Friday. I miss you too. I hate going home to kale and silence. I'd rather face the quarterly review deck naked than talk to her right now. When can we sneak away next week? Sarah, 10:55 p.m. last Friday. I'll check the schedule. My compliance review is stacking up, but I need a break with my office husband soon, or I might actually lose it. The office husband joke was no longer funny. It was a code word, a deliberate, mocking cover for an actual affair. It was the final vicious nail in the coffin of my 10-year marriage. I leaned against the wall, reading and rereading the exchange, the words blurring through a sudden film of tears. The betrayal wasn't just the sex in the server room. It was the calculated cruelty of it all, the way they had laughed at me, at Jennifer, at the very institution of marriage, all while hiding behind the veneer of corporate professionalism. The server room, in our office building, the audacious, sickening proximity of their deceit was staggering. My first thought was to smash the phone, to scream, to wake her up and throw the truth in her face and watch her entire world crumble. But I was an auditor. I dealt in facts, in evidence, in the cold, hard logic of documentation. Anger was fleeting. Proof was permanent. I went to my desk, opened my work laptop, and logged into my personal email. The laptop was always secure. My mind was numb, but my fingers were working with the precision of a trained professional. I opened the messaging app on Sarah's phone again, navigating back to the key messages, the confessions, the plans, the reference to the 5 minutes in the server room. I started taking screenshots, dozens of them. I captured the date, the time, the full text of the conversations. I saved the images, transferred them to my laptop, and organized them into a single damning PDF file. I was creating a document that was going to destroy 3 lives, possibly 4, but I did it with the cold, sterile focus of a man filing taxes. This wasn't just proof for me anymore. This was a nuclear option. This was evidence for HR, for her husband, for the divorce lawyer I knew I would be calling in the morning. Mar Peterson had gotten transferred, all right. Not just to another office, but straight to the center of a firestorm I was about to unleash. And I had the documentation to prove it. The agonizing night of sleepless dread had ended, replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating certainty of vengeance. The night was agonizing, stretched taut between the cold realization of the betrayal and the terrifying plan I had engineered. Sleep was impossible. I was trapped in a loop, rereading the screenshots on my secured laptop, feeling the bile rise in my throat with every flirty, mocking message. The silence of the house felt deafening, amplifying the sound of Sarah's even breathing beside me. She was asleep, perhaps dreaming of the 5 minutes in the server room, completely oblivious that her work husband and her marriage were both about to go up in flames. I spent the next several hours in a moral battle that felt like a courtroom drama playing out entirely inside my skull. Prosecutor, the auditor in me, the evidence is overwhelming. They violated the company's code of conduct on professional relationships and misused corporate assets, the server room. More importantly, they destroyed a 10-year marriage. Justice demands accountability. Send the proof. Defense attorney, the husband in me, if you send this, you destroy her career. You destroy Mark's. You destroy Mark's wife, Jennifer, who is innocent. You make this public. Are you prepared for the atomic fallout? This is vengeance, not justice. Talk to Sarah first. The debate raged. Talking to Sarah first seemed like the mature thing to do, the noble exit. But I knew what would happen. She would deny, she would cry, she would minimize, and she would beg me not to do anything crazy. Then she would delete every single message, and the evidence would be gone forever. I would be left with my gut feeling and her lies. No, I was an auditor. I needed the cold, hard decision based on the data. The data showed two people who had not only cheated, but had treated their spouses and their employer with utter contempt. They had used the professional environment as their playground. They had to face professional consequences. My decision solidified around 4 a.m., fueled by bad coffee and the sheer scale of the deceit. I decided on the nuclear option. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about ensuring the professional environment was no longer a safe haven for their continued lies. I opened my email client. I composed two separate, meticulously drafted emails. The first was addressed to Elaine Henderson, the head of HR, and David Chun, our firm's chief legal counsel. This was the official corporate communication. The subject line was chillingly professional, urgent, serious code of conduct violations. Mark Peterson, 15th floor, tech audit, and Sarah Smith, 15th floor, tech audit. The body was brief, factual, and completely devoid of emotion. I referenced the relevant sections of the employee handbook regarding workplace conduct and misuse of company property. I then attached the comprehensive PDF file I had created, the one filled with the screenshots, time-stamped, dated, and damning. I made sure to note the specific mention of the server room as a clear violation of confidentiality and security protocols. I signed off simply, Johnny Smith, Senior Auditor, 12th floor. No ranting, no emotional plea, just cold, unassailable evidence. The second email was perhaps the harder one to write. It was addressed to Jennifer Peterson, Mark's actual wife. I had found her email address via a quick, slightly unethical search of Mark's personnel file, which I had access to via my seniority and the firm's intranet. Another small detail that was about to blow up in my face for misuse of access, but I didn't care. This email was personal, yet still contained the factual document. The subject line, information regarding your husband, Mark Peterson, and his coworker, Sarah Smith. The body of the message was short and direct. Jennifer, I regret to be the one to tell you this. My name is Johnny Smith, and I'm Sarah Smith's husband. Mark and Sarah have been involved in an affair which they have conducted on company premises. I have attached a file containing screenshots of their private correspondence. I believe you deserve to know the truth. I am simultaneously forwarding this information to our company's human resources and legal departments. I'm truly sorry for the pain this will cause you. Sincerely, Johnny. I sat there, hovering the cursor over the send button. This was the point of no return. The moment I clicked, my life, Sarah's life, Mark's life, and Jennifer's life would irrevocably change. The entire superstructure of our comfortable corporate existence would collapse. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I thought about the lie, the server room, the I miss you texts, and the way they had laughed behind my back. At exactly 5:15 a.m., before the sun was even thinking about rising, I hit send on both emails. A deep, unnerving quiet settled over the room. The evidence was out of my hands. The bomb was set, the timer was counting down, and the fuse was now burning. I felt a weird mix of terror and relief. The anxiety of suspicion was gone, replaced by the dread of consequence. I went to the kitchen, poured myself another cold cup of coffee, and waited for the corporate inferno to begin. I knew, with the certainty of an auditor finding a major discrepancy, that by lunchtime, their careers and my marriage would be over. The Monday morning air in the office was usually thick with the smell of stale coffee and impending deadlines. Today, however, it smelled like ozone, the electrical charge before a massive corporate lightning strike. I got to my desk on the 12th floor early, armed with my lukewarm coffee and a terrifying sense of calm. The emails, the ones that constituted my Monday morning HR email, had been sent at 5:15 a.m. By 8 a.m., I was in place, waiting for the first ripples of the explosion. The first indication that the bomb had detonated came not through an email, but through a change in the building's ambient noise. The 12th floor was usually a beehive of activity, but around 9:30 a.m., a strange, nervous energy seemed to descend from the 15th floor, carried down by the building's ventilation system and the anxious faces in the elevators. I watched my email inbox like a hawk. The response from HR head Elaine Henderson was surprisingly fast, arriving at 9:47 a.m. Johnny, thank you for bringing this extremely serious matter to our attention. We have received and reviewed the document and are initiating a formal, immediate, and highly confidential investigation. Due to the severe nature of the allegations and the potential misuse of company resources, specifically referencing the server room, the individual's name will be placed on paid administrative leave, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. We have also alerted the necessary parties on the security team. Please do not discuss this matter with anyone. We will be in touch. Elaine, my hands were clammy. Administrative leave. That was corporate code for cleaning out your desk later. The system was moving. The gears of corporate justice, usually slow and rusty, were grinding into high gear because of the security and compliance angle. The explicit mention of the server room was the specific, damning content that had triggered the high-speed response. I didn't hear from Mark's wife, Jennifer, but I knew that email had landed. The silence from that front was perhaps the most frightening thing of all. I imagined her reading the messages, organizing her own counterattack, the sheer shock of seeing her husband's private confessions laid bare. Around 10:15 a.m., the door to the elevator on my floor opened, and I saw a sight I will never forget. Two figures in sharp black suits, escorted by a third, very uncomfortable-looking security guard, stepped out. It was Elaine Henderson and David Chun. They didn't belong on the 12th floor. Their presence here, moving with grim determination, was a clear sign of the corporate upheaval I had set in motion. They were on their way up to the 15th floor, or maybe they were coming back from it. But the real drama unfolded just after 11 a.m. I was in a tense, meaningless meeting about Q3 projections when my phone, sitting discreetly on the table, started buzzing relentlessly. It was Sarah, call after call. I muted it and stared at the caller ID, feeling nothing but a cold, heavy dread. Then, a text from her. What did you do, Johnny? HR just escorted me out. Mark is gone. What's going on? And a minute later, call me right now. I know this is you. You're insane. Call me. The meeting wrapped up quickly. I mumbled something about a stomach bug and fled back to my desk. My heart was pounding now, a frantic drumbeat of consequences. She knew. She had figured out instantly that the auditor husband, the one who lived for evidence, was the only person who could have done this. I didn't call her. Instead, I stood by the glass wall overlooking the elevator bank. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor and I saw the action live. Sarah was being escorted out. Her face was pale, blotchy with tears and outrage. Her usual professional composure completely shattered. She was clutching her small personal bag, but nothing else. She looked like a ghost, betrayed by a system she thought she understood. And behind her, equally stunned and visibly sweating, was Mark Peterson. He wasn't even attempting to look professional. His tie was loose, his jacket was askew. He looked less like a corporate golden boy and more like a busted criminal being marched to the interrogation room. The sight of them, side by side, being publicly humiliated, was my strange, twisted moment of triumph. They were sharing their last professional moment together, and it was a walk of shame straight past their bewildered colleagues and down to the lobby. As they stepped into the elevator, Sarah's eyes, wild and accusatory, flicked down to the 12th floor. I saw her look right through the glass, and for a split second, I swear she saw me standing there, the quiet, betrayed husband who had just deployed a corporate tactical nuke. The door whooshed shut. They were gone from the building. By lunchtime, exactly as I had predicted, the office husband and his work wife were gone from the company. The silence on the 15th floor would have been deafening, and on the 12th, the rumor mill was spinning at hyperspeed. My screenshots had not just gotten them fired. They had publicly shamed them and irrevocably tainted their professional reputation in the small, incestuous world of high-level auditing. The first part of my plan, the corporate justice, was complete. Now came the much harder part, the domestic fallout. The moment I saw the elevator doors close on the 15th floor, taking Sarah and Mark, the office husband and work wife, out of the building and out of their jobs, a peculiar stillness descended on the 12th floor. The air was thick with whispered theories, But the architect of the chaos, was silent and cold. I waited a tense hour, pretending to review a massive ledger, knowing the confrontation with Sarah was inevitable and imminent. The drama had merely shifted from the corporate stage to our private arena. My phone rang just as I was gathering my things to leave early, feigning a sudden, violent headache. It wasn't Sarah. It was a block number. I answered cautiously. "Johnny, it's Elaine Henderson. HR." Her voice was tight, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. "I need you to come to my office now. Bring your laptop. Security has some questions about how you accessed Mark Peterson's HR file to obtain his wife's email address." The misuse of access. I knew that was coming. I was playing a dirty game, and now it was time to face the music for my own small transgression. The company was ruthless about protecting its assets, even if it meant chastising the messenger. The meeting in HR was swift and brutal. I defended myself with the same cold, rational logic I used to uncover the affair. I only accessed the minimal information required to alert an innocent third party who was directly impacted by the corporate misconduct. I did not disclose private salary data or client information. I used the access to protect the company from a potentially larger legal risk down the line. If Jennifer Peterson had been completely blindsided and later sued Mark, the company, and possibly Sarah, for negligence or emotional distress, that's a bigger liability than me viewing an email address. They bought it. Or, more accurately, the sheer convenience of the evidence I provided outweighed their desire to punish me. I walked out of HR with a verbal warning, a black mark on my professional record for unauthorized access, but my job intact. My small revenge had only cost me a slight bureaucratic inconvenience. The real drama, the chaotic fallout I craved and dreaded, began the moment I stepped into our house. The atmosphere was poisonous. Sarah was pacing the living room floor, her face streaked with tears, a crumpled tissue in her hand. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, likely showing her my email to Jennifer. "You monster," she spat the moment she saw me. It wasn't the sound of a wife who had been caught, but of a woman whose career and life had been summarily executed. "The word you're looking for is husband," I replied, taking off my coat and hanging it neatly, the mundane action feeling jarringly out of place. "The man you lied to for months. The one you ridiculed with your office husband joke while you were using the server room for a quick 5 minutes." That phrase, server room, hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, her denial instantly crumbling into pure, devastated shock. She hadn't expected me to have that specific, damning detail. "Ow, how did you know about that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "I know everything, Sarah. I'm an auditor. I audit. And you left a digital trail of breadcrumbs so wide, a blind man on a unicycle could have followed it. I have the screenshots. I have the dates. I have the entire sordid story saved in a PDF file titled Exhibit A." Her reaction was the first, frantic phase of denial, the gaslight. "It wasn't like that, Johnny. It was just emotional. It was stressful. Mark was going through a hard time, and I was just being supportive. The server room was a one-time thing. It meant nothing. We were just venting. It was a joke. You're blowing this completely out of proportion," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "One time? You talked about doing it again next week in your texts. And it meant so little that it cost you your 6-figure job and Marcus' marriage, which you also discussed at length. You said you missed the thrill. Do you talk about thrills with coworkers who are just venting about depreciation schedules?" I countered, my voice low and steady. I wasn't screaming. I was delivering a verdict. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. The shock and the attempt at denial had passed, replaced by the crushing weight of the immediate professional consequence. The dual termination announcement had hit her first and hardest. "You had no right to send those emails," she cried in her hands. "You ruined me. You ruined my career." "You ruined your career, Sarah," I said, walking towards the kitchen, suddenly needing a glass of water, anything to wash the taste of this confrontation out of my mouth. "I just provided the documentation. An auditor doesn't create the fraud. He merely reports on the findings." and your findings were conclusive. You cheated. You lied. You did it on company time, and you used the joke of the office husband to rub my face in it. I simply reported the fact to the people who needed to know, HR for the professional violation and Jennifer for the human one. I took a long drink of water, the cold liquid doing nothing to quench the fire in my chest. The confrontation was messy, ugly, and exactly what I had feared. And yet every time she tried to deny the truth, the memory of those screenshots, the detailed, damning content of their chats, gave me the cold strength to stand my ground. The drama was rising, but the truth, the documented, unassailable truth, was on my side. The corporate firing was fast. The domestic fallout was a slow, agonizing process. With the initial shock and defensive screaming out of the way, Sarah moved into a mode of frantic rationalization. She still couldn't believe the swiftness of the company's action, and she certainly couldn't believe I, her quiet, spreadsheet-loving husband, had been the one to trigger it. "You don't understand the pressure on the 15th floor, Johnny," she argued, her voice now hoarse but insistent. We were standing in the wreckage of our living room, the scene of the earlier storm. Mark and I were a team, a genuine lifeline. We were carrying that whole department. The lines get blurry when you're working that closely for months on end. It's a classic case of trauma bonding, not some deep, passionate love affair. Trauma bonding doesn't usually involve discussing quickies in the server room, Sarah. I countered, leaning against the doorframe, still using my steady, auditor's voice. I was exhausted, but I knew I couldn't let her rewrite the narrative. You didn't need a lifeline. You needed to set a boundary. You chose Mark's attention over your marriage. You chose the thrill over the stability you supposedly wanted. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze when confronted with the facts. The truth was ugly, and her attempts to paint it as an understandable workplace mistake were failing. This was the moment of Sarah's shock and immediate denial giving way to the grinding reality of consequence. But even as she struggled with the truth, her core betrayal wasn't just physical. It was a deeper, structural failure. She hadn't trusted me with her struggles. She hadn't confided in me that she was unhappy. Instead, she had turned to Mark, weaving a shared life with him that excluded me, and then using the joke of the office husband to mock my own trust. I brought up the texts again, the ones where they disparaged me, calling me the sleeping giant and referring to my work as so boring. It's criminal. Did you really think my work was boring? Or was that just part of the shared fiction you and Mark created to justify your distance from me? I asked. Her eyes welled up again. I was angry, Johnny. We were fighting a lot. It was easier to vent to him because he was fighting with Jennifer too. It was a shared misery. We made each other feel less alone. That's all it was. He was just a temporary emotional escape from the reality of being an audit couple. It was a devastating confession. The core of her argument wasn't denial of the act, but a justification of the reason. She was unhappy, and Mark was conveniently there, offering validation and a shared corporate foxhole. While Sarah was still reeling and trying to argue her way out of the narrative, my phone buzzed with an official email. I opened it and read it silently. It was from the firm. The subject line, internal announcement, personnel changes in tech audit division. The body. Please be advised that Mark Peterson and Sarah Smith have both been transferred to external opportunities, effective immediately. We wish them well in their future endeavors. The firm remains committed to upholding the highest standards of professional conduct and integrity. I showed the email to Sarah. The phrase transferred to external opportunities, the final, perfectly crafted corporate lie, was the official dual termination announcement. The company had scrubbed them clean. No mention of HR violations, no mention of the server room, just a clean, professional separation. Their careers at the firm were officially over. Sarah read the email, and the last vestiges of her self-defense drained away. She wasn't just fired. She was publicly, professionally erased. The corporate safety net we had both relied on for a decade was gone, shredded by a handful of cold screenshots. They didn't even fire us for the affair, she choked out, a horrifying laugh bubbling up. They fired us for the server room violation, the misuse of corporate assets. They care more about the security of their data cables than they do about human relationships. That's the audit life, Sarah, I said, shrugging. It's always about the compliance. The affair was the personal cost. The server room was the professional trigger. You broke a compliance rule that was easier to enforce than a morality clause. The silence that followed was heavy with mutual devastation. She had lost her job, her reputation, and her marriage was hanging by a thread. I had lost my wife, my partner, and the comfortable security of my life. But the final act of this messy, corporate revenge was still playing out. As we stood there, absorbing the reality of the firing, a frantic, insistent ringing started at the front door. Not a pleasant chime, but an aggressive, repetitive stab. We both froze, staring at the door. "Who is that?" Sarah whispered, suddenly terrified. I knew. The final bomb I had dropped, the email to Jennifer, Mark's actual wife, was about to explode right here, on our suburban doorstep. I didn't even need to open the door to know that Mark's real wife shows up was the next terrifying scene in this drama. The aggressive, insistent ringing was Jennifer Peterson, Mark's wife, and she wasn't here for tea and sympathy. As the ringing escalated into a loud, frantic banging, the drama I had unleashed in the professional world was now spilling, violently and loudly, into the quiet, manicured setting of our suburban home. Sarah looked like she was about to faint. "Oh my God, Johnny, you didn't... You sent it to her? You actually sent the proof to his wife." "I warned you," I said, walking toward the door, not with speed, but with a terrifying, deliberate pace. "I told you I was filing a full report. She was an affected party. She had a right to the data. Don't open it. Please, Johnny, don't." Sarah pleaded, rushing after me, but I was already turning the lock. I opened the door, and there she was, Jennifer Peterson. She was a few years older than Sarah, impeccably dressed, but now completely undone. Her face was contorted with a mixture of grief, rage, and profound shock. She wasn't holding a briefcase. She was holding a crumpled printout of the PDF file I had emailed her, and she was shaking with fury. "You're Johnny, right? Sarah's husband?" she demanded, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry through the neighborhood. "Yes, Jennifer, I am." I stood squarely in the doorway, blocking her entry. She didn't even look at Sarah, who was hiding just behind me. Her focus was entirely on me, the bearer of the terrible news. This file, the screenshots, is this real? Is this really what Mark and your wife were doing? In the server room? I maintained eye contact. "Every word is genuine, Jennifer." I confirmed the source and the timestamps. Mark and Sarah were both terminated from the firm today because of the evidence contained in that document. I was truly sorry to have to send it, but you deserve the truth. Jennifer let out a devastating, raw wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain that tore right through me. She wasn't angry at me. She was shattered by her husband's betrayal. He told me they were just co-workers. He said he was working late on the quarterly deck. He told me he was eating kale because I made him. He was with her. And you knew this morning? You just walked around with this. The scene was a spectacle of public chaos. Neighbors were starting to peer out their windows. The air was vibrating with the intensity of her grief and rage. I only found the conclusive proof late last night. I explained, keeping my voice low and respectful. I acted on it this morning. I sent the proof to you immediately after I sent it to HR. Jennifer took a step back, looking from me to the printout in her hand. Her face shifted from grief to a terrifying, cold resolve. "He's done. My marriage is done. I'm going to clean out his bank accounts and sell the SUV. He can have his server room, but he won't have a home to go to." She crumpled the PDF in her hand, her eyes flashing with a strength I hadn't expected. "Thank you, Johnny," she said, her voice now dangerously calm. "Thank you for telling me the truth. At least I know I'm not crazy." She turned sharply and marched back to her car, leaving the faint, lingering scent of expensive perfume and raw heartbreak in her wake. I closed the door slowly. The silence inside the house was absolute, broken only by Sarah's quiet, ragged sobs. The confrontation with Jennifer had been the final, definitive marker of the destruction I had caused. Mark's life was now also a smoking ruin. Sarah finally spoke, her voice shaky. "You watched her. You just stood there and watched her fall apart. You enjoyed it. I watched a woman realize her life was a lie. Sarah, I replied, turning to face her. And no, I didn't enjoy it. I'm devastated for her. But I also feel a twisted kind of relief. Because now, you and I are dealing with the truth, and so are Mark and Jennifer. The lies are gone. The hypocrisy is gone. The office husband has been effectively transferred to hell, and he took his work wife with him. The dramatic confrontation, the Mark's real wife shows up scene, had achieved its goal. It had ripped away the last corporate and domestic safety nets. There was nothing left to hide behind. The only thing left to do was figure out what remained of our own marriage, and that conversation could only happen in the profound, aching silence of the quiet drive-home revelation that was still to come. The rising drama had peaked. Now came the difficult, emotional descent into the final truth. The house, once the scene of Jennifer's furious heartbreak, now felt heavy, suffocating. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to hide. Sarah, defeated, finally agreed to my suggestion. We needed to leave the house, get in the car, and just drive until we could talk without the walls closing in on us. This was the moment for the quiet drive home revelation, though for us, it was the quiet drive away from home revelation. We drove in silence for a long time. The setting sun cast long, orange shadows across the road, a visual metaphor for the twilight of our 10-year marriage. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, occasionally letting out a shaky breath. I drove with the detached focus of someone navigating a heavy machine, my mind numb from the day's emotional violence. I broke the silence first, my voice flat. So, the truth. No more corporate euphemisms. No more blaming the trauma bonding. No more denying the server room. I need to know why. Not the he was supportive answer. The real one. Sarah took a moment, then finally, quietly, she let it all out. It wasn't the angry denial from earlier. It was the broken, painful truth. I was lonely, Johnny, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Not alone, but lonely. We became roommates who shared a tax bracket. We both worked so hard to build this safe, stable life that we forgot to actually live in it. Every night was a rehash of the last audit. Every vacation was spent arguing about the budget. We stopped being us and started being the audit couple, focused, efficient, and completely drained. Her words cut deep because I knew, in the dark corners of my own mind, that she wasn't entirely wrong. We had prioritized the climb over the relationship. The shared corporate cynicism that had brought us together had ultimately hollowed us out. And Mark, I asked, the name still leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Mark was just easy. He saw me every day. He was fighting the same battle. When he started saying things like, "You're too brilliant to be trapped here," it was like a drug, Johnny. You stopped seeing my brilliance years ago. You just saw the other half of the mortgage payment. Mark saw the person I used to be, or the person I want to be again. We just slipped, slowly, accidentally, until the joke became real. Then came the physical admission, the hardest part of the full, painful truth. The server room, it was stupid. It was terrifying and stupid and fast. We were both working until midnight, exhausted, hyped up on stress. It was a release, a way to feel something, anything, that wasn't the relentless, mind-numbing pressure of the audit firm. It only happened twice. But those 5 minutes felt more electric than the last 5 years. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face, the setting sun catching the wet trails on her cheeks. I am so sorry, Johnny. Not just that I got caught, but that I did it. I destroyed us. And you had every right to do what you did. Every single right. You were right to send him to hell. Her complete admission, her acknowledgement of my right to retaliation, was the final, devastating act of honesty. The betrayal was real, but the reasons behind it were complex and rooted in the shared failure of our marriage. We had built a perfect cage of stability, and she had clawed her way out in the messiest, most destructive way possible. The rest of the drive was spent in a profound, heavy silence. We didn't talk about divorce, or logistics, or who would take the cats. We just drove, absorbing the immense, quiet tragedy of our failure. When we finally returned to the house, it felt different. It was no longer a home built on a lie. It was a ruin built on the truth. We walked into the kitchen, and I looked at the table where I had compiled the screenshot evidence, where she had collapsed in denial, where Jennifer had stood in raging grief. The resolution wasn't a neat, clean closure. It was messy, agonizing, and open-ended. We were both unemployed in the same corporate auditing city. Though I was only suspended for the minor violation, my reputation was definitely marked. Our professional lives were irrevocably intertwined with our personal destruction. I looked at Sarah, stripped bare of her corporate shield and her lies. What happens now? I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. She didn't have an answer. Neither did I. The twist wasn't that she didn't cheat. The twist was that the complete, professional, nuclear retaliation I had planned was successful. And yet, it provided no real satisfaction, only profound, mutual devastation. The server room quickie had cost him everything. The quiet that followed Sarah's full confession and the dual termination announcement was the sound of our life rebooting from factory settings, empty and sterile. The final 2 days were a blur of logistics, not emotion. Sarah packed a small suitcase, agreeing to stay at her sister's place for a while. We decided to separate physically to gain some perspective, leaving our resolution profoundly open-ended. The physical affair had ended, but the real challenge, the dismantling of 10 years of shared life, was just beginning. As I sat alone in the now empty house, surrounded by the remnants of our life, her side of the closet bare, her toothbrush gone from the holder, the only thing I could focus on was the profound cost of the nuclear option. Was it worth it? I had achieved perfect, total, professional, and personal revenge. The office husband, Mark Peterson, was not only unemployed, publicly disgraced, and facing a brutal divorce, but his wife, Jennifer, had gotten the indisputable proof she needed to protect herself financially. My own wife, Sarah, had lost her career, and the constant, nagging anxiety of suspicion had been replaced by the quiet, terrible dread of loneliness. I had played the role of the righteous avenger, the auditor who corrects the ledger. I had filed the final, correct report. The problem was the final balance sheet was entirely negative. The memory of the shock on Sarah's face, the moment she realized I had the specific, damning content of their chats, still haunted me. It wasn't the look of a malicious cheat, but of a deeply unhappy person caught in a self-made trap. And Jennifer's heartbroken wail, the sound of her world shattering on my doorstep, was a constant, awful echo. This wasn't just a story about catching a cheater. It was about the moral dilemma of retaliation. I had felt so entitled to my anger, so justified in my vengeance, that I hadn't stopped to consider the innocent collateral damage. Jennifer Peterson was the truly innocent party, and my actions, while giving her the truth, had also delivered a massive explosion of pain right to her front door. Did my right to get even justify the complete destruction of Mark's family? The irony was that the very things that made me a great auditor, the precision, the cold focus on evidence, the merciless pursuit of the correct answer, were the things that made me a terrible, unforgiving husband. I didn't give Sarah a chance to confess, to explain, or to fix things. I didn't talk to her. I filed a report on her. I treated my wife's infidelity like a corporate fraud scheme, and I applied the maximum penalty. The resolution was this. I was right to expose the lie, but I was wrong in the cold, hard, professional way I executed the exposure. As I look back, the image I see most clearly isn't the screenshot of the server room text. It's the image of Sarah and Mark being escorted out of the building, heads bowed, their careers in ruins. And then the image of Jennifer, destroyed on my doorstep. My lingering question for myself, and for you, is this: in the heat of betrayal, is the goal to seek justice, or is it simply to inflict pain? My auditor's mind told me it was justice. My quiet, empty heart told me it was a catastrophic failure of empathy, a final act of hellfire that burned down everyone and everything in its path, including me. Mark Peterson was transferred to hell, but I had a permanent seat right next to him, haunted by the consequences of my own perfect professional revenge. I'm sitting here now, months later. The dust has settled, but the wreckage remains. The house is still mine, quieter than it's ever been. Sarah and I are moving toward a divorce. The break wasn't clean, but the truth, once exposed, made any reconciliation impossible. Mark Peterson is, last I heard, working as a consultant for a small, non-profit auditing firm miles away, keeping his head down and dealing with his own, much more bitter divorce. The office husband joke, for him, really did result in a transfer to a personal hell. But the real focus, the thing I still grapple with, is was it worth the hellfire? Question. I achieved total, definitive justice. I executed a perfect professional takedown of two people who violated my trust and mocked my marriage. Yet, that permanent damage, the cost of the nuclear option, was far greater than the original injury. Think about it. The betrayal hurt me, but the revenge ruined 3 lives and inflicted massive pain on an innocent party, Jennifer. My actions were driven by the need for truth and the desire for consequence, but they were ultimately fueled by a rage so cold and calculated that it alienated me from the people who could have offered support. The silence in my house now is a monument to the price of being right. I lost my wife because she became disconnected, and then I lost my marriage because I chose to be an auditor first and a husband second. The minute I stopped talking to her and started documenting, I stopped being her partner and became a prosecutor. The biggest twist in this story wasn't the server room. The twist was that by winning so completely, by sending him to hell, I condemned myself to live in the scorched earth he left behind. The righteous satisfaction of revenge is incredibly brief. The devastating consequence of a completely scorched earth policy lasts forever. So, I ask you, sitting here alone in the perfect, audit-ready silence of my house, if your partner's work husband or work wife started pushing the boundaries, what would you do? Would you confront them gently, hoping to save a marriage? Or would you do what I did, go straight for the throat, collect the evidence, and initiate the corporate and personal apocalypse? I chose the latter. And the truth is, I got my revenge, but I lost my peace. The cost was everything. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it's messy, and I know my actions were extreme, but they were real. If you like this deep dive into corporate betrayal, please drop a comment and tell me what you think the innocent parties, Jennifer and myself, should do next. Like this video and subscribe to The Office Hours if you want to hear more stories about the hidden chaos beneath the spreadsheets.